Hi everyone, buenos días o noches donde quiera que te encuentres. Welcome back to Bailando con los Espíritus. I am your host La Bruja.
And I'm your co-host Freddie.
This time around we want to bring you some of our experiences when we went to the missions.
Yeah, to give you guys a little bit of background as well. Over the summer of 2022, we kind of had the idea of visit all the missions in California. We wanted to record and do like a little YouTube video of all these missions. So yeah, and we ended up doing a total of 5. It was San Buenaventura, Misión Santa Bárbara, Misión Santa Inés, Misión La Purísima Concepción, and Misión San Luis Obispo.
So just to give you some history of California missions, began before the American Declaration of Independence, which was signed in 1776, and it ended 25 years before the gold was discovered in 1848. The missions were established throughout La Calle Real. It's like a long journey, starting since Mexico, no?
Yeah, it goes from Baja California and some of Mexico as well. And it goes all the way through California. If you follow the Camino Real, you should be able to hit all of the missions. I thought that was pretty cool.
The first mission, if you start at San Diego area in California, that one was built in 1769. And as you go through the Calle Real, the missions were then established. You have the mission San Diego, San Luis Rey, San Juan Capistrano, San Gabriel, San Fernando, San Buenaventura, Santa Bárbara, Santa Inés, La Purísima, San Luis Obispo, San Miguel, San Antonio, La Soledad, San Carlos, San Juan Bautista, Santa Cruz, Santa Clara, San José, San Francisco de Asís, San Rafael y San Francisco Solano, que se construyó en 1823. It's a lot of missions, to be honest, but during that time, because we're pretty close, we decided to just do those for now before we start traveling further and kind of exploring them. Our main goal was to explore the history, but we figured that there was a lot of hunting happening in these missions.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, there was a lot of rebellions, wars between all these missions because a lot of these Spanish settlers that came in California, they were kind of forcing all the Chumash and Native Americans that used to live all around California to convert to Christianity. Just imagine a lot of deaths happen.
And our first mission that we traveled to, it was founded in 1782, and that is located in San Buenaventura, which a lot of people know it as Ventura, California, during Father Serra's lifetime. And that church is still a church. The mission is still continuing to be a church with masses and pues sí, todo.
Yeah, just like a regular church, yeah.
Yeah, I think they expanded the area too to have rooms for catechism
and I felt like this one was one of the smallest ones out of the 5 that we visited. It didn't have a lot. We just explored the main church itself and then the garden, and there was like a little museum portion of this. Not a lot happened here. But there was a funny story that we actually heard. You want to tell it?
Yeah, we got to Ventura and we decided, hey, let's take drone footage here.
Yeah, I just saw the drone footage was me zooming into the church and then like hovering around it just so we could get a perspective of like how the church is shaped and anything that's surrounding.
Yeah, and it is located downtown, and during that time they had the farmers market there. So we were just doing our thing, and then suddenly we see so many people running towards
like
us.
A big group of people running towards us, and we were confused like what was happening. And then
we asked them, we're like, why are you guys running? And they were like
full panic mode and everything.
Yeah, they had the kids almost arrastrándolos.
Yeah. But yeah, we asked, and then it's like, oh, what's going on?
And at that moment we heard a loud sound, and so I said, someone has a GUN. And so we started running with them too. And we ran like a couple blocks, no?
And then I think it was like 2-3 blocks.
Yeah, and then because the farmers market, it's like it stretches throughout a bunch of blocks. We noticed that some people were still in the farmers market, and I was like, oh, what's going on? Is it happening, or like, should we leave? Should we stay? What's going on? So then we went closer to the mission area because we were wondering why people were just like walking and just chilling pretty much. And una señora se nos acercó and we asked, escuchó ese sonido, and she's like, oh yeah, creo que era un cohete de porque alguien estaba haciendo su misa, que alguien había pasado a otra vida. And yeah, it was just that. I was actually curious because in my rancho they usually shoot like cohetes to say that someone has just passed away, pero yo no sabía que era algo cultural, que supuestamente es para que los malos espíritus no estén cerca si no hagan más mal.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Anyway, so once we went into the church, there's like a small section for a museum, pero no hay tantas cosas que mirar. Después, like, everything's pretty like close together. Oh, the mission is beautiful for sure. I 100% recommend just visiting and going there. It's just so nice. And during that time, actually, someone was getting baptized, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. So we stuck around a little bit to see how they did it.
Yeah,
that's pretty fun.
Yeah, but other than that, we really did not found any huntings in the area. But I do remember there was a swami right next to it where they put the swami. That was actually a cemetery, which is interesting because this is right next to the mission.
Right. Yeah. And they turned that all into like a parking structure.
Yeah. And that used to be a cemetery.
Yeah. So like a lot of these missions, we kind of find it kind of like messed up that they turn those old cemeteries into like parking structures or extended churches, and it just kind of like rubs it the wrong way for us because these people like died and kind of not letting them rest in peace.
They're being disrespected at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
So then after we left the mission, we came across this lady that said, oh, you guys should go to the big cross at the top of the mountain. And we were like, okay, let's go check it out. It was really nice.
It's like a little drive up there.
Hike/park.
Yeah,
I'll call it. Yeah, it's a nice drive. Overviews the whole city of Ventura, and it's so nice because it's right next to the ocean. It looks beautiful, and there was a lot of people taking videos there, pictures.
Somebody was having like a little party over there, a little barbecue party.
Someone was having like a wedding photograph session or something like that.
There was a lot of things happening in that little spot.
But one thing for sure that we found out about the big cross in this mountain was that supuestamente there's a spirit of a Native American woman que se mira a medianoche. And they say that it was a Spanish soldier during that time that took advantage of her and buried her body near the cross, and that's why she comes out. And también when we did the little small hike there was like a little section que creo que alguien había pasado a otra vida también ahí, ¿te acuerdas?
Sí.
There's a lot of electrical wires very close to you.
There's like a big sign saying like, oh, be cautious, like do not or cross at your own risk, because the wires are pretty low there. So, yeah, anything could have happened there.
For sure. And one thing that we recommend if you do decide to travel to Mission San Buenaventura or just a small hike, just be careful because anything could happen, and make sure that you read the warnings and you respect them, and so that nothing happens.
Yeah, we always did at every mission that we visit is said a little prayer to allow us to enter their spots, because we know that a lot of bad things happened during the mission era, and that we're only there to just learn more about their history, and we're not going to do anything like bad.
To disrespect, for sure. Yeah, esa fue una cosa que I thought it was important to do, just have a small prayer before we enter these missions, porque no sabemos where the cemeteries were located, and I mean, a lot of people did pass away, and so we just don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And we don't know what bad time they had during when they were living, and so we also don't want to disrespect those memories.
Yeah.
Well, let's cross to Mission Santa Bárbara. La misión de Santa Bárbara fue fundada en 1786 por el padre Lasuen, y this mission is known as the Queen of the Missions. It's one of the most beautiful missions in the whole chain, and it's really nice, to be honest. And hay mucho turismo. La ciudad hace muchos eventos, como por ejemplo cuando celebran las fiestas españolas.
Yeah.
That's their opening. They go to the mission.
The ceremony.
Yeah. And the church is still functioning as a church. Tienen misa.
It was also one of the most expensive entrance fees to check out the mission.
Oh, I know.
I think it was like
so much.
$30 per person or something like that.
I don't know, but it was pretty
really
expensive.
I'm like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Misión Santa Bárbara has a lot of history and a lot of interesting things that we found there. But some of the main highlights that we want to tell you are the following. We could start with how the Rose Garden was a big cemetery of the Native Americans, and it was abandoned, by the mission, I guess, because it was part of the mission, and it was just replaced by a garden, and the new cemetery was just built right next to the mission. And again, it's a disrespect to them. And one of the things I found through my research was that the Native Americans would actually not use crosses in their ceremonies when they would bury their loved ones. Instead, they would use bones de ballenas.
Whale bones.
It was really interesting, pero pues todo eso se perdió y ya no se supo dónde quedaron sus áreas de dónde estaban enterrados. And with that being said, when we went into the cemetery in the mission, we felt kind of odd, because it's a cemetery and it's a lot of tourist people just walking in the cemetery.
Yeah, there was at one point where a group of people, it was kind of like blocked off, but there was like a tree in the middle of like the cemetery, and people just kind of started going over the little blocked up area and taking a photo next to that tree. So I don't know, it felt weird and very disrespectful to us, because we don't know if there were deceased ones in that area, and people are just stepping around like if it's nothing, and just very disrespectful.
One of the things that we also noticed in the cemetery was that when you enter, or I guess you exit the cemetery, there's some statues or some skulls made of like cement that represent that entry to the cemetery. But during our research, we found that these skulls were actually real skulls, which I found that so crazy. And another thing too that we noticed in the cemetery was that there's this big cross right in the middle, kind of.
It's like more towards or I guess behind the big tree, because the big tree was kind of like where the middle of the whole cemetery was.
Yeah, and because I guess they don't know where the people are located at that point, and so the big cross represents a respect towards them. It was very interesting just to walk through there, and it felt weird. I did not feel comfortable being there. And one of the things we found in the main church is that there's a lot of statues, which was carved by there was a lot of famous people coming to that Santa Barbara mission, because it was like one of the main points.
I think it was like this where a lot of trading happened.
Yeah, because that's where the jail was located too. They didn't have jails anywhere else.
No, this is one of the only ones that had a jail.
Yeah, and talking about the jail, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so there's a jailhouse right, it's a little bit across the street from where the cemetery is located. And basically, this is where like the Spanish soldiers would throw all the chumash that weren't were not converting to Christianity, or were like rebellion towards converting to Christianity. So they placed them in this place called the jailhouse. And yeah, I mean, obviously they're gonna end up dying there because they don't mistreat them and everything. And then later on, there was an incident where a lady was unalive there. So because of all that negative energy that was in the jailhouse, when I went to go visit it, it just felt so cold, creepy. And then some people have said that there was dark apparitions in that jailhouse. I didn't go inside there just because of how it felt. I just videotaped around there, but then left out right away because it was just not, I was feeling very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and the last creepy thing we found was the dark apparition that supuestamente se aparece in the left tower. And the story goes that an older man named Don Antonio fell in love with a young lady, and so then he proposed to her and she refused, and I guess he just hated that, and he decided to unalive himself from that left tower, and that's why people see at dusk an apparition in the left tower.
Yeah. Oh, I think one thing we actually forgot to say as well. Inside the church, people have seen like hooded friars like leaning down and praying as well. And then some people also have experienced being touched by like a friar. So yeah, that's also pretty interesting to see at the church.
Yeah, okay, well, now let's move on to Mission Santa Ynez. Mission Santa Ynez, give me a second here. It was founded in 1804 and is the 19th in the chain, the 19th mission in the chain, and it was established by Father Esteban Tapiz. And so this mission is located right at Santa Ynez, which is not that far from Santa Barbara. It's designated as the Mission of the Passes. So there was a lot of visitors that had to battle the San Marcos Pass, and they just went up there to take refuge. Yeah, so that's how this Mission Santa Ynez was created. One of the things that we saw in this mission is that it's very big but small. When it was first funded, it was pretty big, but then a rebellion happened, and so it got reduced, the actual structure, but the space is still pretty big and the land is not being used. Yeah, when we got inside, there was also a little museum as well, just talking about the history. And right outside there's like a very small rose garden, and that's the whole thing with the missions. All the missions so far, they have like a small museum talking about their history, a rose garden, and a big cross,
yes.
And a cemetery right next to them.
Mm-hmm. That cemetery was also it wasn't like all the other missions where it was like a big section and it was kind of like barricaded by some fence. It was just like wide in the open, and they had like a little pathway, and yeah, I mean, that was pretty much it. And then they had like a bunch of little crosses around the grass area, but it was just not, I guess they didn't really know where any of these crosses or where people were buried in that cemetery. So yeah, I mean, anybody could have been stepping on their graves, and yeah, like we said in the other two missions, it just feels weird and very disrespectful to walking around those areas.
One of the things we found out about this mission is that it was the first Cal State University was founded in this mission, with 2 or 3 rooms maybe. Yeah. I guess those 3 rooms are right on top of the cemetery or right next to it. We don't know. We just don't know where all these bodies were buried, and so we're just like praying to, making sure that we're not disrespecting and just there for historical information.
Yeah.
Other than that, the only creepy thing we found about this mission is that I guess people had witnessed apparitions of people screaming, because durante ese tiempo había una rebelión. creo que los nativos se querían ir contra los misioneros, and they ended up unaliving a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with that, we went to Misión La Purísima. This one is located in Lompoc, California.
And it was founded in 1787 by Father Lasawen, que es el mismo padre que fundó la de Santa Bárbara. This one is called Misión La Purísima Concepción.
Yeah, and a pretty interesting thing that we discovered here is that the current location of La Purísima wasn't the where they were first established. They had their first original mission located more towards the downtown area of Lompoc.
Yeah.
But there was like a big earthquake that hit, and it destroyed a lot of the buildings or a lot of the mission. So they wanted to relocate, and this is the current place of La Purísima is where they ended up relocating and setting up everything.
One of the quick facts here, it says that it was rebuilt several times, and the first complex collapsed and was rebuilt in 1802 and fell again in 1812. And then in the spring of 1813, the mission was then moved 3 miles from its original. So the first thing that we did when we got there is that there's this museum. We found out that this church is not functional. The mission is not functional. It's just in a, I guess, they converted it in a state park. And so the whole region, which is one of the biggest missions in California, with so much land, was converted to a state park. There's state rangers just taking care of it. There's areas where you're not supposed to do certain things just to protect the flora and the fauna. Yeah, we went into the museum, and that's when we found little things such as, the original Purísima was moved to another location. And right after that, there's like a small gift shop, which usually the gift shops are like inside the museum. This one was outside, and the museum is pretty huge in this one. The gift shop, you could just go. It's alright. One is actually inside of one of the adobe structures there, and so it's interesting. One of the things that we found about this mission is that they kind of mimic how the mission used to be by having animals. So they have horses, donkeys, they have chickens, just a bunch of animals. And the garden is still like functioning, everything's fine. And once we got to the main entrance of the whole mission, it's hard to describe what the entrance is, just because the mission itself is kind of a long stretch with very many different rooms, and some of these structures are also all around the land, which they were designated for their own purpose. So some of them were like their nursery, or like the hospital, the clinic, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of little things.
Yeah, so there was some areas where they would collect water and things like that. So yeah, just a lot of the main mission was separated by the priest house, and by the working locations, and by the mission and the chapel, because they also have a chapel there, which, I mean, it makes sense. It's a very big church or mission. Another thing we found out about this mission is that after it was abandoned, the United States government actually took it and used that as a way to train their soldiers during, was it the World War II?
Yes, it was during World War II.
Yeah, so they would train them there, and there was a lot of locations that were damaged, and so in order to repair the adobe, they had to put a little bit of concrete, kind of like to hold it up. And so a lot of sections are actually repaired. Some of them are actually currently being repaired as well, just so that the structure keeps stable. One of the things too is that the church never reclaimed it, just because they would have to put a lot of money to replace and reconstruct some of the areas, so they just decided to leave it like that. Yeah, that's like the main thing about that mission. But let's get into it. Like, I mean, once we got there, it felt pretty...
Yeah, it felt pretty lonely. It just felt off. It felt sad. A lot of... kind of felt gray. I don't know. It was just isolated, and a lot of the rooms were pretty cold as well. It was just a lot of sad things that happened during those times. For example, the big cross in the garden was a spot where it felt kind of weird and lonely.
So there was a lot of cold spots throughout the mission, and some of the highlights that we have for you are the following. First of all, there is a water collection point up pretty far. I want to say like about a mile from the main entrance of the mission. And this is where they would collect rainwater to be redistributed to, you know, all the working structures. And when we were there, definitely felt odd and smelled pretty weird. And we decided to just dip, just because it felt like we needed to leave at that point.
It kind of felt like if people were watching us.
Yeah.
Didn't it?
Yeah, it felt like someone was watching us. And yeah, so we just decided to leave. We were there for less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, we just explored it, took a couple pictures, and like, let's get out of here, because
Yeah.
it just does not feel safe.
So then when we went back, again, it's a pretty big area. We ended up entering through the garden area, and there was a big cross there too. And right next to the cross, there is a small device that they used to use for just to check the time. And again, it felt pretty weird and odd just having that big cross, just because in the other missions they will always represent like people buried on that area, you know. Then after that, we then decided to go inside the rooms just to check them out. And again, the state has made it possible for us to see how it used to look like. And so they have a lot of antique things there,
Pottery, furniture,
yeah,
books, just to make it feel like if somebody was living there in those old times.
So walking through these areas, we first noticed that there was a lot of bullet holes on the mission pillars. And then after we did our research, we found that there was an actual rebellion between the Spanish soldier and the Native Americans.
Yeah, so the Spanish soldiers were shooting at the Native Americans that were in the mission. And yeah, you could actually still see those bullet holes on those pillars. And according to some people, late in the night, you could actually see some Spanish soldiers in those lands kind of like wandering around.
Another area too that there was a cold spot. It was in the guest room, which was previously the priest room. We actually saw a video of some people saying that visitors have noticed that bed being undone, and actually like if someone was sitting in the bed.
Sitting, or as if somebody was laying down there and then got up, and it just looks kind of like messed up.
Yeah.
And people like redo the bed and everything, but it just like when they come back later, it looks undone again. So
mainly the park rangers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and there was actually one of the park rangers actually saw like a dog at the very entrance, and when the park ranger like went in, and because they were confused as of why is there a dog right there, and they went into that room, and that dog was no longer there. So yeah, that's pretty creepy.
All the rooms are pretty open for the visitors to go in there and kind of take a look, but there's one specifically that has like a gate or just bars that they're not allowing you to enter, and that was the room of the second priest. So there used to be two priests. One would be the business, the one that would manage the business in the mission, and the other one would be the spiritual, the one that would do the masses and all that. And so in that room, it was hard to take some video and stuff like that, so I put the camera through the bars because my hand is pretty small. The image wasn't going through, or the camera was acting up.
Yeah, it wasn't focusing it. Usually you could tap on the screen to get the camera to focus, and it works like just fine. And for some reason, we would tap on it and it wouldn't focus, and it would kind of started glitching out. And then we ended up just turning it off and turning it back on, and it started working.
Then after that, we decided to take a look at the chapel, and it felt weird.
That the chapel and the church were the most spookiest, I would say, spookiest places on the whole mission area. Mainly because, at least in the chapel, there is this specific cold spot next to the confession booth. And you were actually wandering around that confession booth. Like, did you feel anything in there?
Yeah, it just felt pretty cold, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, I did not expect anything, especially because during that time I hadn't read any of the Huntings, and thank God, because I wouldn't have gone all the way. But no, it was just pretty cold. That just the whole chapel and the church, it just made me feel uncomfortable. That's all. But in that very specific area, it was just a little bit more colder
than usual.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a thing that we read about saying that some lady walked in that spot and then it felt like if somebody had pushed her?
Yeah, it was a tourist.
A tourist.
There's a lot of tourists. That's one thing for sure. When we went there like 2 different days, just because it's a huge mission to take video and just talk about everything. Yeah, the first time there was a lot of tourists. The second time there was not a lot of tourists and felt lonely.
Even with the tourists being there, it still feels pretty lonely regardless. So I don't think it has anything to do with the tourists. One thing for sure though, there's a lot of people with their bikes and just doing a lot of like random stuff in there.
Yeah, once we enter the actual main church in the mission, like the actual mission, there was no one. There was no one, and we went in there. We were just exploring.
It was also pretty dark.
I did not like it at all. That's it. I just did not like it.
We didn't even stay there that long. I think it was like a couple minutes, and then we left.
I just didn't like it. It just felt weird.
Dark. It was also dark because there was not a lot of light.
Yeah.
And it smelled old.
Yeah. I didn't like the feels. So in this mission, there's no chairs or anything. So it was pretty empty, I would say. There was a couple of religious images there. One thing for sure that we noticed in most of this mission is some of the priests that passed away during their time. They were buried right in front of the altar.
Oh, yeah.
So it was pretty interesting.
Oh, and do you remember at the very center there was like a cross with El Crucifixio de Jesus? And he had like his head tilted in a very like odd way.
Yeah.
And we were kind of like freaking out because we're like, oh, shoot, like, is this like a sign?
Is this normal?
And we were over there Googling it and trying to see if it was normal, but we didn't find anything like similar to it. So we just were so weirded out about that cross.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was trying to avoid not talking about it because it made me feel weird. Anyway, so then we decided to go through the other side, which is the back of the mission area, but it's still inside. And it's just where the priests would leave the religious things that they would use for mass. And it also felt lonely, but it didn't feel like the actual main church. It had more light.
Another room.
Yeah, it just felt normal. Yeah. There was nothing. And then right after you exit the whole mission and you go to the outside, that's where the cemetery is located.
Yeah, and it's like it's where all the church bells are located as well. So whoever wants to ring those bells, they have to go through the cemetery and climb up like a little stairs to get to the bells.
And again, there's this huge cross right before you enter that says, they says that it represents all the people that had passed away and buried there. They just don't know where they're located. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because a lot of these tourist people, they just don't care. And they had made it so that there's like a small gap
section. A little path. Like, it doesn't look like it was intended for a path to be there. It looks like after so many people like walk through there, it just became a path.
Yeah, like when you hike and you make that path,
Yeah.
your path. Yeah. After that, then we decided to go around and just kind of like go all the way back of the rooms that we had previously explored. And that section also feels lonely. Just the whole mission area, the whole area feels creepy. Especially when there's not a lot of people around, it just feels so creepy. And yeah, so that's pretty much what we found in that mission. Our next mission that we traveled to was Misión San Luis Obispo de Tolosa. It was founded in the 5th in the chain, which was founded in 1772 by Father Junipero Serra. And the fathers first discovered La Cañada de los Osos, which this is where they decided to establish this mission.
And in this mission, there wasn't a lot of things that we found out. The biggest thing that came to us was that they extended the church where the cemetery used to be. And yeah, I mean, it was just like we mentioned, it was just so messed up that they dug out all these pieces.
So this mission is actually a functional church. There's masses and there's also a big cross right next to it, but there's no signs of a cemetery. And it's not that big of a mission. It's pretty small compared to the other ones. I think it's even smaller than San Buenaventura. And so
I think it's bigger than San Buenaventura.
You think so?
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit more bigger. The museum was a lot bigger. The garden area was a lot bigger, and the church itself was just a lot more bigger.
Well, I don't know. I'll have to disagree with that. It felt smaller. But anyway, so one of the things that we found is that I guess people have found that there are people buried there, and so there's signs that say like, oh, this person is buried here, or things like that. Some of the priests are buried too in the front, close to the altar. And the mission was actually extended in one of the sides, and that side is where they used to have the cemetery.
Yeah.
And other than that, the one interesting thing about this mission is that the ceiling was painted with some stars, just to make it seem like they were outside, especially for the Native Americans that had been converted to Christianity, and they had to be indoors and have a different life, and so they couldn't see the stars outside, so they painted them inside to make them feel more at home. But other than that, we did not found any hauntings that were interesting in this area. So yeah, that was the last mission, and that's the last thing in our notes.
These missions are pretty cool. I always recommend people to go check it out and just learn more about what had happened here in California, but also be mindful of wherever people had passed away and all the bad things that happened in missions. So yeah, just be respectful and go there and learn some new things.
Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.
Bye.